What happened?
I walk into my accountant's office as I do every year, and he goes, "Sit down, Jim. We got to talk, and we can get you some help." And I'm like looking at him, I'm like, "Joe, what are you talking about? Get me some help." He's like, "Well, we're going through your books, and it says you've lost $65,000 this year." Now, I only had a revenue of about 250, 265,000 at the years, and for me to have a loss of $65,000, I'm like, "What's going on here?" So it was like a big freak out moment for me to have a business, think I was on top of the world, get my taxes done when really I was losing money and I didn't even know it. And I vowed from that moment forward that I would never wait to the end of the year to find out if I made money or lost money, and then having my accountant confront me with it and then go into a complete panic. So
Oh,
it was a crazy moment being in business.
so you're at 250 and you learned that you're at a $60,000 loss at that point.
Yeah, yeah, it was crazy.
It's enough to wake you up, right?
Yeah, it's a great time going into the
Yeah,
holidays with knowing
yeah.
that. So it was
Well,
perfect.
you've come a long way since then. But first, today's guest is from Peabody, Massachusetts, the president of Kaloutas Painting. Jim Kaloutas, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Take us all the way back to the beginning because that's a crazy story, but you've come a long way since then. First, how did you get into the business?
It was out of necessity. Immigrated here from Greece with my parents, my sister, and my dad had to get a job. Got a job with my uncle being a painter, and he would always get laid off in the winters. So dad always had side work. So I was always exposed to doing work with dad. My English was better than my dad's,
How old were you when you
so
came across, when you
I,
came?
w- I was only 2.5. So I had been around it, and then my dad being there and working away, that he always had side work.
Mhm.
So again, I got exposed to the trade at a very young age. And it wasn't until after high school, went to college, dropped out after a month. I wasn't really ready for college. I didn't have the discipline to get the work done. So I started taking classes and stuff. And I went back to what I knew, which was painting, and just started it from there.
When you got started, how did you generate your leads? How did you get going? What did the startup days look like? The grind, the early
Yeah,
grind.
well, you probably have heard about having a PhD, and that'll get you through anything. Being poor, hungry, and determined.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
Um, and it was just go to where we knew. We would always do residential houses. We would do roofing. We would do um, renovations, patios. We do all kinds of different things. And it was just people knew us. People would give us leads from the local paint store, and we would get by. And my dad and I would make a living.
So it's you and your dad working together, the
Mm-hmm.
startup days. You still work together? Is he still involved?
He's not involved. He's retired, hangs with mom, eats all her cooking. So,
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
yeah.
So how long ago was this?
31 years ago.
So 31 years ago, it's you and dad. So you get going, and many of us started off that way, and many of us had different ideals than our fathers did. Did you guys continue to work together the whole time, or?
Pretty much. And it was great in which, we knew that we were father and son, but at work,
Mhm.
we always had our regular arguments. I think me
Yeah.
thinking I knew everything and my
Okay.
dad knowing that I didn't. But
Okay.
again, at the end of the day, he was always my dad, and,
Mm.
everything was great at home.
I'm curious, what habits or culture did he bring with him from the old country that worked better here, or maybe didn't?
I would say just his work ethic. I think I learned a
Yeah.
lot from his work ethic. And even today, people look at me and they think I'm a hard worker. And I just even think of reflecting of how hard of a worker my dad was, and I don't come anywhere near him.
Mm. Okay. So the two of you get going. You guys have this insatiable work ethic, and get into residential. You get going, and then what? Do you hire on some painters? I mean, it's 30 years ago.
It was interesting back then. We just found people that we knew to help out as we got projects. And
Okay.
it was probably right when I had decided to drop out of school, or just after my senior year in high school, that my dad, because when we first started, we weren't really a legitimate business. But one of the things that my dad did for me way back when is, we would pay all the guys, we would pay all our materials, and then
Hmm.
my dad and I would split the money. And clearly he was doing 80% of the work, and
Yeah.
I was good at getting coffee and donuts, and
Hmm.
there's some things that you're good at, and I was good at
Yeah.
getting coffee and donuts.
Yeah.
So, but he always split the money with me, and for me at a young age, I got to learn transactions and
Mm.
to just learn that aspect of understanding the math of it. And really the wake up call was that when we would do a job and we actually would make less than our employees, because again, we didn't know any better. We didn't price it right. And it was those aha moments that, you know, I think back at like, oh, okay. You know, that's where that lesson came from.
Very good. I think many of us have gone through that. What would you say to those maybe who are still out there, maybe either they're startups or they're still at that, I don't know, $100,000, $200,000 range, and they have a guy or two, or maybe they're 300 and 400. How do you make that mind shift? What was it for you guys?
Well, the early days, I don't think we realized what we were worth at what we were doing. We were doing good work and people relied on us, but I don't think we realized what we were worth. And I remember in the early days, you know, one year, I think I had taken one of the seminars or something, and I realized, wow, maybe I should raise my prices. And I doubled my sales that year just from raising my prices. Some of the customers that were working with me didn't want to work with me. I'm like, well, that was obvious because they were just staying with me because I was a cheap price. They didn't really care about me.
Yeah.
And then the ones that really cared about us, we did more work with them. So it was an aha moment from many levels, whether it was me appreciating my own self-worth, my dad's self-worth, and then seeing the differentiation of the customers. And that did something pretty unique in which it allowed us to actually hire better painters. You know, the biggest struggle as a painting contractor was, who do you have for the right people? So it was that evolution of like, let me get better customers to make better money so I can hire better painters.
And it all started from stumbling upon a seminar.
Yeah, imagine that, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a philosophy, and you'll probably hit me with a couple other questions that I always believe in investing in myself, because it's where I should spend the most amount of my money. And over the years in growing my business, I actually probably in the last maybe 7 to 10 years realized that, oh, wait a minute, it's not just me that's running this company. Maybe I should invest in my employees too. So we've been doing that heavily in our teams, whether it's our teams out in the field or our teams in the office.
Let's unpack that a little bit. First, start with your process or habits of investing in yourself. What does that look like? Do you have a budget amount and or do you, you know, certain goals you hit? How do you know when you're aggressively investing in yourself? How do you know if you're being passive or moderate, or what would you say your process is for investing?
Sure. It's nice to think that I actually have a process, and I don't know if I'm self-diagnosed ADD or however you want to look at it.
It's ADG.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. This is my theory. It's ADG. Sure. I believe that messy people call it a disorder. I think it's a gift.
I strongly agree with that it's a gift. And I think that has been, so for me, it was just a natural curiosity. And I just followed that curiosity. And part of me was, I couldn't stick to doing one thing. And, you know, learning more and more and just, you know, I got more, you know, it's hard in reflecting of what really started driving it, but I think it was that just natural curiosity. I just wanted more.
Wanted more, natural curiosity. So you're wired with the growth mindset.
I would say so. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Entrepreneurs Organization, but I had a bunch of my forum members, and one of them, their dad was a professor at MIT, and we happened to have one of our retreats at his house, and he was giving us all the data on what makes, you know, successful, you know, high-tech corporations. And I remember one of them being that the entrepreneur was exposed to family members that have had businesses before. And it brought me back to when my dad worked for my uncle, because my uncle was a big entrepreneur. My dad wasn't an entrepreneur, my uncle was. And just remembering his whole dynamics as a business owner, and it brought me back to thinking, like, yeah, I never thought anything that it was that difficult to become a business owner. You just do it. And there was no barriers for me, rather than over the years talking to my friends who are not business owners or not entrepreneurs, there's such a wall for them, or they had a state of mind that they are going to go work for someone. They're going to go to school and get a job and go work for someone.
In 25 years ago, it wasn't cool to be an entrepreneur, was it?
It was actually a little embarrassing. I remember my sister was actually using that word on me, and I was just like, no, you know, go easy on me, you know. And it was interesting, you know. And the you know, mid to late 80s.
Yeah, now it's in, but I
It's
think that
in.
a lot of us forget, or we're too young to realize that what it used to be. So
Sure.
you also had that against you.
Absolutely.
Curiosity built. So we get the company going, and we're up and rolling. You get to, how fast does it grow from startup? Can you kind of walk us through?
Sure. Once we actually, established it as a legitimate business, 1987, got insurance because we found our first contractor. So, I'm working for this contractor. The contractor says, hey, if you're going to be in business, kid, you better go out and get a fax machine. And, now we don't even use fax machines anymore. And back then it was the rice paper. And I remember unpacking it and bringing it home. And my dad's looking at me. He's like, what'd you do? You bought another computer? And I'm like, no, Dad. The guy told me I needed one of these if I wanted to be in business. First 10 years, it took us 10 years to go to $1 million. So 0 to $1 million, 10 years.
Okay.
And then probably the next 10 years, we 10x'd it again. So we went from 1 to 10 in the next 10 years. And then in the last 10 years, we're in the low 20s right now. So we were able to push it to that and, just keep it going.
Low 20s, just for clarification, in case everybody was multitasking. Million.
Sure. 21, 22 million.
21, 22 million. So 10 years to get to 1, and then another 10 to get to 21, 22. That's pretty significant, and nothing short of remarkable. First, well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The first, what are some of the distinctions? What are some of the distinctions between the growth from the first million to get the decade to get to the first million, and then the decade to 10x that?
Yeah, for me, it was being able to get a number 2. I think in the early years. So in the early years, my number 2 was my dad, because he was very much the executor, get the job done, and I was trying to problem solve the whole business thing, and how do I get more jobs? How do we do that? Who's the right person to work for? And going from 1 million to 10 million, it really was fully crossing over into the commercial market.
Okay.
And I met a gentleman that worked for another commercial painting company, and we got together and said, hey, how about I come work for you? And that gentleman is Bruce Jerky, and this year he's actually retiring. He's been with us 21 years. But it was that other team atmosphere of us working together, and what I learned from him and what he brought, and then what I brought, and building a team around me to be able to support all my shortcomings. So it's like, I didn't even know how to hold a meeting. I didn't really know how to properly write a proposal. And here Bruce was, helping me write a proper proposal to now start to work for real general contractors rather than guys that thought they were a general contractor building a home.
Did you have to work through some self-talk or mind shift of, I'm just a painter, to I'm a business owner, to make that leap?
Oh, that took a good, where was it? I was probably in the early 2000s when I did that shift. And I think the Entrepreneurs Organization is what caused that shift for me. That in itself got me thinking. Here I am in the forum with guys that had a recycling company. They had a paper mill. They had Panera Bread franchises. And it was there that I realized that I was not, I was behaving like a painting contractor, even though I hadn't picked up the brush in such a long time. But being around those guys is really where the big mind shift was, to no longer being a contractor instead of being a business owner.
That's awesome. So circling back, if I heard you correctly, it was great hires, surrounding yourself with a great team.
Sure. Great number 2s, 3s, 4s.
Where did that mind shift come from? Well, I've got to hire guys and pay them as least amount as I can so that I can be the most profitable, to hiring talent.
Well, it was interesting. For me, it was never about the money. I think I in the early days of the transactions and doing what I did with my dad, it wasn't about the money, rather than liking and enjoying being in business. That the gig that I had, whether because I got my American Express card, because I was the real big fish in a very small pond, and until I met my entrepreneur group, that's when I really shifted, because now I was exposed to guys that were 10 times, 20 times bigger than I was. And it was like, wow, there's even more room to grow from that perspective.
Very good. Culture. What does culture play in all of this as you make the transition? And again, the distinctions between the first million and then a million to the 21 or two now.
Hmm. Culture. It's interesting now we've been able to really focus on culture and see the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, we didn't realize that there was such a thing,
Right.
but we realized that we had one. I remember one of the speakers that I went to listen to, said that, listen, walk me into any company. I walk into it within 5 minutes. I can smell the culture because everybody has a culture, and some of them stink. And it's
Mm.
really understanding what your culture is, and it comes down to the person's core beliefs. And I think some of the seminars or the things that we learn from is like, what are your values? Well, that's who you are. Trying to have a company that has different values from who I am would never work for me. I'd be clashing with the people that I'd be here. I'd be thinking that they're trying to take over my company. So I think being able to understand my values and start to define them in the early years was very helpful for me to realize, hey, how do I grow it? And then it became easier and easier because I attracted people that were similar to me. They didn't have the same personality styles as I did, but their values were similar to mine. And then it was easy to get everybody rowing in the same direction.
That is so good. I was just reading Traction again for the second time. In chapter 3, they talk about values.
Sure.
And so we had our values with Burnett Painting. But he made the point that those who established their values and kept them top of mind everywhere at every meeting across the company ended up selling their companies for much higher multiples. I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I'd known that before I sold them, right? And so it sounds like, and then those that were purchased were some of the most successful of the companies the ones that that acquired those the
Mm-hmm.
values. What do you guys do to make sure when you're hiring on that, especially key employees or direct reports, that you're in alignment with the values?
How we go about doing the interview. So I need to speak to every person that is going to be hired at
Mm-hmm.
least at 1 or 2 times within the process. We do personality tests. We do phone screenings. We do group interviews. We literally will do what's it called? The speed dating that they do. We do a speed dating of candidates. We'll bring in 3 candidates and
Yeah.
we'll have 3 rooms set up with people to interview them. And every half hour, the candidates switch to another group. And then after the hour, we push all 3 out and then we all debrief and
Mm-hmm.
start to talk about it because they're like, no, that person can't work. I couldn't work with that person. Did you hear
Mm-hmm.
what he said about that? Did you see how we reacted to that person? So we protect our culture and our culture will push out the bad people because again, we still get it wrong. I'll be lucky if I get it right 50% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, the culture will push that person out.
How many do you employ total currently?
And we're probably running at our actual employees
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in the 140, 175 range, depending on the season.
Wow, 140, 175. What can you give us I don't know, executive summary of the top of the org chart of an organization
Uh,
that has
sure,
so
sure.
much
So
production out there?
the way that we run it, so there's 2 sides of the business. There's the flooring side and the painting side.
Mm-hmm.
Our flooring is industrial flooring. Our painting is commercial painting. I'm at the top as the president. I have 2 key people, which are my COO. She runs sales now, and our controller, who's in charge of the finance. We have a business development guy who oversees business development from both the general contractors that we work for and the building owners that we work for. And we have 4, call them project executives that run their own teams. So we actually have 3 other locations other than this location. So each of them runs a team of 2 to 4 people in the office. So those are the sales guys. Separate from that, we have the 2 operations teams that run paint operations or flooring operations, and then from there we have field managers that are running multiple jobs, and then each of our jobs are running anywhere from 2 to 10 guys on a job. So our crew size, just because we're that much bigger of a company, we don't really run that much larger of a crew size. we're just more efficient with what we get done. And we're usually doing about 1,100, 1,200 jobs a year.
Wow. So, yeah, efficiencies would absolutely be critical with that size operation. What programs or processes help you to be efficient?
Yeah, you keep thinking that we probably are just starting to get good at creating process. I think our accounting software was probably what we adapted early on. From there, our accounting software is Sage, or it's a Timberline product. Our reporting, to be able to know where our job costing is, was vital. Knowing our numbers and closing our books once a month. Our estimating software, we use PlanSwift right now. It's pretty, standard in the industry. Scheduling, we're using whiteboards for scheduling. We could do better from that perspective. And that's it. I don't know if it's a secret sauce. I think it's more of around the rhythm of how we meet and how we talk. That's important. Every Monday we have a meeting, and it's called the Great Game of Business, in which we're complete open book management, and we share the numbers with everybody. And, we talk about what's going good, what's going bad. We talk about our values every week. We have the value of the month, and we drive it from that perspective. So that way we look for examples of people exhibiting our values when we have that meeting. What else do we have for process that we do? Every Thursday is almost like a financial meeting day that every project manager that has, he probably has 20 to 40 jobs going, sits down with accounting to look at all his jobs, how they're doing. And it literally will take about, 15 to 30 minutes a person to go over their jobs. And at that point, they tell accounting to do their billing. They tell accounting to send the change orders. They tell accounting, what's happening from that perspective. And then we get to understand what's happening as well, to say, hey, look, your billing is really light, but you don't want to bill anymore, but your costs are really heavy. Hey, let's throw up the red flag and get someone out there to do a profit analysis on that job. And is there a cost to complete that we need to make sure that we see if we're going over and under because there's a red flag going up somewhere. So it's that financial meeting, I think, is very helpful once a week.
Very good. Now, what are some pitfalls when you're operating an organization of this size?
Sure.
We don't know, right? So what are some things we learned the hard way?
All my blind spots,
Yeah.
I still have lots of them. And I would say just most recently, this past winter, I think we had a couple jobs that didn't go so good. We had overhead that was a little bit higher than it needed to be, and our sales were off just a little bit. And with those three things not being so good, we were running, from $500,000 to a $700,000 net loss for the first half of the year. And, that was a complete blind spot. It was nice to how the team rallied. We completely turned it around in the next 5 months and brought in the fiscal year profitable. So
wow.
it was a nice turnaround.
Nice. What are some fun projects that you've worked on? Anything that you guys, take a picture of, frame it, put it in the office, and maybe the green monster? I don't know.
I'd love to be able to tell you, but I think I signed a non-disclosure. But we've had plenty of those.
Okay, cool.
Some local
that's fine. Don't want to compromise.
Sure, no. Some local sports players, some quarterbacks and stuff like that in the area. So, what else have we done? I think I keep driving by, and I think as a proud dad, when I'm in the car with my kids, I'm always saying, hey, look at that building. They're like, yeah, Dad, we know you painted that. Look at that building. Yeah, I know you did. So
I'm guilty.
I think
we did the same thing.
Yeah, right. We all do that. I think lately there's two things that are hot, and I think it's breweries, and I think breweries are pretty hot. The craft brewing industry is great. I don't know if we have Trillium beer, we have Treehouse beer out here in Boston, which are pretty popular. And then the other thing is that we're doing a lot of cannabis facilities, and I think we just had our first trade show that we actually had our booth at the cannabis trade show. So it was, I guess, those have been
interesting.
Fun
Okay. Very interesting. Being of the growth mindset in the seminar and just a natural desire to want to learn and grow, which I absolutely appreciate. Books. What are some books along the way that have made a big difference for you? Maybe in the beginning and then, catch us up to current.
Oh, I would say the early on, I remember 2002, I read this book Jim Collins, good to great. I think that stuck with me.
What were
Just
some takeaways there for you that just really?
just being able to embrace the cold, brutal facts that sometimes you're in a very shitty place,
Mm,
and having the faith that you'll get through it. I think every 3 to 7 years I've gone through that, and it's not easy being in business. I think, and that was a big takeaway for me. Looking at ways to be profitable. You talked about rinsing your cottage cheese if you really want to make a difference. What are the little things and the details that you have to pay attention to?
mm,
And I think just open it up as the possibility of being a level 5 leader. I think not going to college or dropping out after a month,
mm.
and needing to reinvent myself as from some perspective, enjoying what I do, loving what I do, but I better get good at it. And then just having the inspiration of looking at myself as like, wow, could I ever become a level 5 leader? Have it not be about me, have it be about the people, the organization. And, that's really what drives me now is,
Mhm.
I've been fortunate to be surrounded by the people that I have on my team, and watching them grow actually gives me more fulfillment than the money. Because again, there's only so much of materialistic things that you can get that, seeing people grow makes a big difference.
I really appreciate this. Would you agree that once you get to a certain income level, the happiness doesn't really change after that? And so that's why it's wonderful to see other people grow.
You better love what you do. And I think for me, that's really where the gift is, and
Mhm.
really making a difference in people's lives. Because one of the things that I believe I have is I like to observe people. I like to watch people. And I have this passion to watch people that are really good at what they do. And it doesn't matter what industry. So for me, sometimes when I'm talking to the people that I work with, here in the company, I can almost see their potential a little bit better than they can.
Uh,
And I think sometimes they're drawn to me, and I was like, listen, you have it. It's like, you got to start believing in yourself as much as I do. And it's like, let's go, giddy up. Let's get it done. And I think there's some aspect to see that over time with, having people do their goals. They've never done goals. And I make them sit down and write out their goals for, 1 year, 3 year, lifetime goals. And they've never written down their goals. And then to see themselves actually checking off some of these things has been amazing.
that's awesome. I love that. Do you find that when you do this, you have to dig a little deep to help them to make the mind shift from they've been programmed or they've grown up to know what they don't want, and it's incredibly hard for them to think about what they do want.
Yeah, and even with me, I remember in my early days that it's hard for me to realize what it was that I really wanted, and I really just I meet them where they're at, and they're perfect right where they're at. And for me, it's not going to be like a one and done type thing. It's
Mhm.
got to be I challenge them to like just, hey, grab this idea, think about this, and then let them go. And it's not going to happen overnight, but over time, they actually grab it because they have it inside of them, and they start running with it. Because again, I can't want it for them more than they do. They're the ones. It's their dream. I'm just helping them dust off what they really want to think about.
That's awesome. Well, we got on that. We're talking about books. I cut in on Good to Great. What are some others?
I'm going to turn around. I got a whole bookcase
Yeah,
over
go
here
ahead.
that nonstop reading. Here we go. Here we go. Favorite books. Generations Inc. Just understanding, what motivates different generations and making sure that we help people from that perspective. Um,
Mm. Well, let's touch on that one just a moment. Do you
sure.
have millennials working for you?
I would say so. Yes.
Okay, all right. So, is there anything you do different to help the younger generation? Because it's
You know,
different, right? We give them trophies, and so they are competitive. They love to
sure.
compete against each other, but then they
Yeah.
want the whole company to win at the same time, which I think is beautiful. You
hmm
know, what do you
No,
find?
no trophies here.
Mm,
And I think it's just, I think we have a tendency to joke around a lot about the millennials. And I
mm,
think they have some pretty neat attributes because they want to take so much on so fast. And it's like,
mhm.
well, why wouldn't we give it to them?
Yeah,
And it's interesting to see the reaction to some of the people that I work with is like, well, what do you mean you're going to give them an opportunity? I'm like, why not? The worst thing that they could do is fail. And,
Right.
and then we help them through that. And I always say it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to screw up. Just don't make the same mistake and screw up over and over again. You can make it once and learn from it. And I think that's really the opportunity that you give them, and you let them run with it. And if they have it in them, why not feed it?
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So that was that book. I'm sorry, what was it? Generation Inc.
Generation Inc. I think it helped me understand that each of us are motivated differently, and to get into the root of understanding what perspective we might have because we grew up in an immigrant family, what perspective we grew up because we grew up in the Great Depression. And I think that's going pretty far back, but each of us has been grown up with something different, whether it was, before 9/11, after 9/11, the Great Recession. There's different things that affect us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jim, this has been great. You're a busy guy, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is there a final point or comment that you'd like to make or share?
I think it comes back to make sure that you keep investing in yourself. And then once you get yourself to the level that you've invested in yourself, start investing in your people, whether it's some coaching, whether it's coaching for yourself. That investment is really, you don't see it from a day to day. You're not going to look at the ROI. Did I get X amount more? But I think it's over time that it starts to compound. I think about the book. I'm trying to remember who it was that talked about being able to become an expert at something. You needed to have 10,000 hours at it.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell. There you go.
Yeah.
And I think there's something there when I look in the mirror for myself that all the pieces are starting to come together because, my sister will say I've never been able to stick to anything, but the one thing that she's seen me stick to is my business. So, here it is, sticking to this and keeping investing in myself, that now everything's starting to connect and overlap. So there's that much more of a momentum in my view in the company. So keep investing in yourself and keep investing in your people.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Jim, if our audience listeners want to reach out and follow up, maybe they want to join your team,
Sure.
what's the best way that they should reach out to you?
Email address, jkaloutas@kaloutas.com, or right to the website, www.kaloutas.com.
Awesome. And for our listeners, maybe you're driving, we will post that in the show notes. So don't try to scratch that down, pull over, wait. It'll be there for you after you're all done.
Thank
Jim,
you. Appreciate that.
thank you so much for your time.
Steve, thank you. Thanks for having me.